Mentally, physically, spiritually fit. 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 You wanna be healthy? You wanna be shine? I know there's a long road, but you gotta just climb. Mentally, physically, spiritually fit. 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 Mentally, physically, spiritually fit.
All right, family, welcome back to another episode of Live Today Health Talk. And I do apologize for our timing on today. We'll have a short time here spent together. So I'm going to open up as I normally do with our prayer, a scripture, and then I'm going to get right into our content today, which is titled The Imposter Syndrome. Okay, so if you're like, oh my goodness, what is that? Just stand by because it's not what you probably think it is, okay? So, most gracious and heavenly Father, as we come before you on this day, we thank you for the ability to just share your message and share this word and share this topic with our listening audience on today. Father, as we've traveled the highways and the byways, we thank you for keeping us safe. And we thank you for giving us content on every week, Father. So, Father, as I ask that I be under your will, lead me and guide me, and may we always be on one accord. In Jesus' name, I pray and I thank you. Amen. All right, so for our word of the day or our scripture coming out of you version, you guessed it, right? So go with me to Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. I'll be reading from the King James Version, and it reads, "Let nothing be done through strife or vain glory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves." Please lift people up, right, family? Lift people up. So we do have two announcements, two events coming up very, very soon. And that is one, next weekend, our Band-Aid project. So we're doing more mental health with the arts. So please, if you'd like more information or if you'd like to join us, please contact me, as we have people coming in, not artists, right? But people coming in, and we're going to work together on this Band-Aid project. You can look it up on Eventbrite if you'd like more information, Mindfulness with the Arts, Band-Aid project, or you can contact me. And by the way, please like and share. Please like and share, because we share information for everyone, and it's always a health topic. And today's topic, the imposter syndrome, is going to start out with a little mental health for today. So our disclaimer, as always, the information that I share, if I'm not the owner of it, then I will give you the background or the references to which I get the information. And just as I read it, it does not mean that that's the way that it's going to work for you or fit into your life or fit into a way in which you need to use it. You need to digest it as you receive it and then figure out if it's meant for you. Sometimes it may not even be meant for you. You may not even be going through that. But I am the messenger. And as I share this message, I just ask that you take parts that belong to you to extract it. And then if you need to go ask your doctor, your caregiver, or anyone else, just bounce it off of them to see if it is applicable to you and in what ways. All right. So disclaimer is, what may work for me may not always work for you the same way that it is being delivered. Okay. You may have to just wait and see. Second program coming up is, let's see, August 22nd. We're having Secretary Woods, Secretary for Maryland, VA, meeting us in Charles County for a meet and greet. And then on September 16th, we are looking to have another Women Veterans meet and greet in Prince George's County. So if you're in any of those areas, please either go on Eventbrite to get more information or contact me or message me, all right, so that you can get the information and you can be in the place to ask your questions. Mental health, homelessness, and of course the PAC Act are some of our number one topics as we discuss, because a lot of people don't know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, it's no foul, right? It's no foul because information sometimes is confusing. So come out, find out what you need to do to help yourself or a family member. All right. So that's it for that. So the imposter syndrome. Now, my reference is Very Well Mind. It's the medically reviewed by Amy Morin, but this is coming out of the out of a I don't want to call it an article, but yeah, it is an article. It's called, but it's coming out of a periodical called Very Well Mind. All right. And it's by Arlene Konsick, and it was written or published, I should say, May 22nd, 2023. Imposter syndrome, why you may feel like a fraud. Okay. And this is more geared towards the women today because imposter syndrome is an internal psychological experience that a lot of women are feeling like they're phonies in some areas of their life, despite their many, many successes, right, that they have achieved in that particular area. They're not quite feeling like they fit in all the time. So it has been labeled a internal psychological experience. But I'm here to tell you that after I share with you why it's been labeled such, it is no longer on you. So here's some help for you, okay? You might have imposter syndrome if you find yourself constantly experiencing self-doubt, even in areas where you typically would excel. Imposter syndrome may feel like restlessness and nervousness, and it may manifest in negative ways. You know how you're about to do something and then you start talking yourself out of it? You know, you talk yourself down and you're like, I can do this. Yeah, when I show up at this meeting, I'm going to present this and I'm not going to have any problems and I'm going to talk about A, B, and C. And then mentally, you start talking yourself down. You're going to be in a room full of people you don't know. You're going to be in a room full of subject matter experts that know more than you. You're going to be in a room and you're like, oh, you can't do this. But then you start getting symptoms of anxiety and depression that often accompany this what they call imposter syndrome, right? But it's not diagnosable for as a mental health, as a mental illness. Instead, the term is usually narrowed down to intelligence and achievement, not so much within a mental illness, although it also has links to perfectionism and social content. The psychologists have studied it to say that it's not quite declared, quote unquote, a mental illness just yet. But here, I'm going to share some of the signs of imposter, what they call quote unquote imposter syndrome, and some of the risk factors for developing it. So we'll also discover different types of imposter syndrome and ways that you can cope with these feelings of being insecure when you know that you got it, that you can handle it, and then stop talking yourself out of it. All right. So let's press play for advice on combating imposter syndrome. So let me share with you 5 types. One is the perfectionist. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that unless you were absolutely perfect, right? Unless you were perfect, you could have done better. However, you feel like an imposter because your perfectionistic traits make you believe you're not as good as others might think you are. The expert. The expert feels like an imposter because they don't know everything there is to know about a particular subject, yet you are deemed a subject matter expert. You may be in a meeting and you have people like troubleshooting you. You know what I mean? So they haven't mastered every step in the process because you let those people that are troubleshooting you trip you up and make you stumble. And because there's more of them than they are you allow them to remove you from being the subject matter expert. The natural genius. In this imposter syndrome type, you may feel like a fraud simply because you don't believe that you are naturally intelligent or competent enough to be in the room with those other subject matter experts. And if you don't get something right the first time around it, it takes you longer to master the skill, and you feel like an imposter because you don't catch on just like everybody else is in the room. And so therefore you negate and take yourself away from being the subject matter expert. Okay. Next is the soloist. It's also possible to feel like an imposter if you had to ask for help. If you had to ask for help at a certain level, or when you achieve a certain status and you feel like, I can't ask them for help, because if I ask them for help, I'm supposed to be the subject matter expert. I'm supposed to be the one that's got it going on, right? So if I ask them for help, how are they going to look at me? And since you couldn't get there on your own, you start questioning your abilities. And then the super person. This type of imposter syndrome involves believing that you must be the hardest working or reach the highest levels of achievement possible. And if you don't, then that means you're not all that, right? And it's like, how do we trip ourselves up? And studies have shown that this is more prominent in females. Originally, the concept imposter syndrome was thought to apply mostly to high achieving women. Okay? Since then, it's been recognized as more widely experienced phenomenon that imposter syndrome can affect anyone. But again, I will digress and repeat. It was mostly found in women, or believed that it happened to women. Now, why is that? Don't men go through the same thing? I know we're more emotional, or we may wear our emotions on our sleeves, so they say, right? But you mean to tell me that only women were going through this? And no matter their social status, work background, skill level, or degree of expertise. While imposter syndrome is not recognized as a mental health disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it is fairly common to be found again in women. And it is estimated that 70% of people who experience at least one episode of this imposter syndrome at some point in their lives have this phenomenon that they're not calling a mental disorder. So if you wonder whether you might have imposter syndrome, ask yourself the following questions. Do you agonize over even the smallest mistakes or flaws in your work? Do you attribute your success to luck or outside factors? Are you sensitive to even constructive criticism? Do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony? Do you downplay your own expertise, even in areas where you are genuinely more skilled than others? If you often find yourself feeling like you are a fraud or an imposter, or you just don't belong in the group, it may be helpful to talk to a therapist. This is real. And it has agonized many of people, or stopped people from reaching their highest level of achievements. The negative thinking, self doubt, or self sabotage that often characterizes imposter syndrome can affect many areas of your life. So don't downplay it, because in the inability to be realistic to assess your competence and your skills can be hindered by this syndrome. It can stop you from attributing your success to external factors, or you may find that you berate your own performance or be fearful that you won't live up to expectations if you keep allowing this syndrome to hold you back. You don't have to worry about people calling you an overachiever. And because when you feed into that, then you are sabotaging your own success. So stop doubting yourself, okay? But then I want to also go into some family upbringing that this may come from. Remember, I said this is dealing with mental health. And researchers suggest that upbringing and family dynamics can play an important role in this syndrome, specifically parenting styles characterized by being controlling or overprotective may contribute to the development of imposter syndrome in children. For example, you might have come from a family that highly valued achievement. Family, sometimes we push, 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 or you may have had parents who flipped back and forth between offering praise one minute and then being critical the next minute of the slightest little mistake or downfall. Studies also suggest that people who come from families that experience high levels of conflict with low amounts of support may be more likely to experience imposter syndrome. So, new work or school opportunities can also play into this, because when you're entering a new role, this can trigger the imposter syndrome. For example, starting college might leave you feeling as though you don't belong there. I'm the first one to go out of my family. I don't fit in. These are a bunch of strangers. They're all going to be smarter than me. I'm going for the football team. They're all better than me. Hmm. You've had these thoughts before? The pressure to achieve and succeed, combined with a lack of experience, can trigger feelings of inadequacy in these new roles and settings. Personalities like low self low self-efficacy. Self-efficacy refers to your belief in your ability to succeed in any given situation. Perfectionism plays a significant role in an imposter syndrome, because you might think that there is some perfect script for conversations that you cannot say the wrong thing. You know how you're like, oh my goodness, don't let me say the wrong thing when I get in here, right? Oh my goodness, don't let me mess up. Or you know what I mean? Just so critiquing yourself before you even get started. You may also have trouble asking for help from others, which we talked about before, and therefore you find yourself procrastinating due to your own high level of standards that you've held for yourself. Oh my goodness. Neuroticism is one of the big five personality dimensions that is linked to higher levels of anxiety, insecurity, tension, and guilt. All right. So, social anxiety is can also overlap here. A person with social anxiety disorder may feel as though they don't belong in social or performance situations. For instance, you might be in a conversation with someone and feel as though they're going to discover your incompetencies. Or you may be delivering a presentation and feel as though you might need to get through it before anyone recognizes that you may have messed up. Okay, so let's take a look at these and figure out, or ask yourself, have you had to deal with this before? How did it impact you? And then I want to come back to say, remember, this started as only being diagnosed in women only. So not opposing the diagnosis for women in this imposter syndrome, but I'm here to say that this can impact anybody. So let's talk about this in the workplace, okay? How can workplace leaders set up or create an environment where imposter syndrome does not exist? How can we work together where our women that are aspiring to move up higher can feel more comfortable coming to the table? So we must take it seriously, the language we use to describe our experiences at work. If members on your team describe having feelings of imposter syndrome or even name it directly, listen to them. Honest conversations about this, and then, help them dissect it. And it's a win win situation. You know, there's a word that I'm trying to remember right now because there's a new label out there for this. And I think it was called ghosting, if I remember correctly. Have you ever heard somebody say, oh man, they ghosted you? You know what I mean? Well, that's when they're talking about this imposter syndrome, and they're saying that it happened more so with women. So for managers that underrepresent the those that are trying to make it an even playing field in the workplace, every move to a new position of leadership narrows the number of people who can be considered peers in a cohort group. So start thinking about making groups where you have peers working together, and that therefore it can become a more even playing field. All right. But I'm trying to look through my notes right quick to just find this. And then I have a video to show you. But one last thing, reducing bias in the workplace against women requires action at all levels, including interpersonal relationships. Individual women have spoken to their managers about how they can help them overcome feelings of self-doubt by reinforcing their own belief in their abilities and chances of success. Like phrases like, I know you can lead this big project. I've seen you succeed before and I believe in you. It also helped to expressly be told that they would be supported by their managers and not just left out on the side to do it all by themselves. Most all managers best supported women by genuinely listening to their experiences of gender and or racial bias and expressing the view that it was the organization's responsibility to fix. Now I'm going to air this video, and I want you to remember that you're not alone. This is no longer considered just a woman's uh, psychological issue to deal with. Okay. This involves the entire workplace. And if it's happening to you, you have the right to bring it up to your manager so that the manager can build teams or cohorts, excuse me, to help work on problems like this. And the word was not ghosting, it's gaslighting. Gaslighting is a type of psychological manipulation that causes one to question their own reality. Can take many forms in the workplace when it comes to women of all races and people of color of all genders. Acknowledging imposter syndrome without naming its context with systems of racism and bias is arguably a form of gaslighting. That's the word I was looking for. And if it's happening, or if you've heard that term in your workplace or even in school, check it out. The imposter syndrome. Stand by for this video.
People ask me all the time, Reshma, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? The class of 2023, I am done answering that question, and y'all can hold me to it. Because you see, imposter syndrome, it's not my problem to solve, and it's not yours either. So today, if you'll humor me, I want to squeeze in one last history lesson before we leave this place. go back to the 1890s, a few short decades after Smith was founded. Doctors had identified a never-before-seen medical malady, one that threatened to wreak havoc on the entire female population. That condition was called bicycle face. You see, the original bicycle had one gigantic wheel in the front and one tiny little wheel in the back. Imagine a hula hoop and a dinner plate. Not easy to ride. But then along comes this revolutionary concept. 2 wheels of the same size. Go figure. The power of equality, baby. And as a result, cycling takes off. And it takes off in Europe and North America, and it takes off for women. But with the rise of women riding the bicycle comes the rise of bicycle face. Here are the symptoms of this terrifying condition. These are direct quotes, by the way. Flushed cheeks, hard clenched jaw, bulging eyes, an expression that is either anxious, irritable, or at best, stony. That's right. Long before there was resting bitch face, there was resting bike face. Now here's the thing. It wasn't just women who were riding bicycles. In fact, the majority of those who had taken up the hobby were men. But bicycle face? That was strictly a woman's disease. Why? Because bicycle face was invented to purely scare women off their wheels. Here's what was really going on. Back then, the bicycle became a symbol for a growing feminist movement. All of a sudden, women could go further and faster, and they didn't need to wait around for a gentleman to show up with his horseback and give them a ride. Suffragists could now meet with one another from town to town, and they would take their signs and they would affix them to the front of their handlebars. Because of the bicycle, women even started wanting different clothes. Victorian hoop skirts? Psh, so last season. Women wanted breezy bloomers, better for pedaling. As one magazine wrote in 1896, to men, the bicycle was merely just a new toy. But to women, it was the steed upon which they rode into the new world. Of course, it wasn't long before men started seeing bikes as more than just a new toy too. To them, bicycles and the behavior they were enabling with women were jarring, dangerous, threatening to the status quo. More than a century later, we can see bicycle face for what it is, or what it was. Not a medical mistake, but a deliberate tool, a strategy wielded by powerful men to put women back in their place, to make us stop pedaling. Ridiculous name aside, I think that there's something deeper here. I think that there's a lot we can learn about imposter syndrome from bicycle face. Both of them are strategies used to hold women back, and it's up to us to not take the bait. The way our culture talks about imposter syndrome, you also could mistake it for a medical condition, but it's not. Leslie Jamison wrote about the origins of the phrase in the New Yorker a few months ago, and she talked about how the 2 researchers who had first talked about imposter syndrome didn't call it an imposter syndrome at all. In fact, they referred to it as imposter phenomenon, and it was based on high-achieving white ladies. It was never meant to be pathologized. Still, like bicycle face before it, imposter syndrome was rooted in misogyny. It's no coincidence that the concept first emerged as Title IX became law and women started going to college, or that it gained traction just as Roe v. Wade was decided. And now that women had control over their bodies, they were starting to enter the workforce in droves. Just like bicycle face before it, imposter syndrome was a reaction to women's progress. But this time, the backlash was even more insidious, which is why today, instead of telling you how to overcome imposter syndrome, we're going to question the whole concept. And I want to do that by breaking down some lies we're told about imposter syndrome, starting with the big one, that maybe there's something wrong with you. That imposter syndrome is grounded in actual deficiency. Imagine you're riding a bicycle up a hill, and as you pedal your way to the top, you fixate on your destination and you clench your jaw. That doesn't mean that you have bicycle face. That means you're riding a bicycle. Imposter syndrome is based on the premise that we're the problem. That if we feel underqualified, it's because we are. That if we worry that we don't have what it takes, it's because we don't. But in my experience, I have found that discomfort, anxiety to just be a natural human reaction. You know, when I showed up at that fancy corporate law firm for the very first time, I had not just one, but 2 Ivy League postgraduate degrees. But still, I felt like everybody was speaking a different language. And that's because they were. So many people there had unearned privileges that I didn't. Big law firms were built by and for people who didn't look like me. So it's normal to feel like you don't fit in when you don't fit in. So as much as I love Taylor Swift, it's me. Hi. I'm not the problem. It's not me. And it's not my responsibility to fix the problem. That's our second lie. That's your job to fix yourself. If your face is flush at the end of a bicycle ride, I wouldn't tell you to powder your nose. But that's pretty much what we do when it comes to imposter syndrome. That's the message that we send to you all, that it's your job to make it go away, or at least cover it up. I'm sure you've heard all the tips and tricks. Get yourself a mentor. Learn how to say no. Power pose your way to the top. There are countless, countless books and articles out there. And yes, I'm counting my own on that list. For years, I too have been telling women how to overcome imposter syndrome. And look, none of it is bad advice per se. I really do believe that we should focus less on being perfect and more on being brave. But all those shoulds, they're just ultimately another burden that we put on women that is just not solving the problem. A great example of this is the gender pay gap. You know, in the United States, the gender pay gap has not budged in 2 decades. 2 decades. But still, we keep telling women that you all should, one by one, know your worth, slay your negotiation, ask for more, when instead we should just be telling companies to pay women fairly, right? Provide salary transparency, offer paid leave and childcare, both proven to close the pay gap. Companies, not individual women, have the power to erase disparities overnight. Similarly, though, when it comes to imposter syndrome, the unspoken assumption is that if you don't stick up for yourself and you feel like an imposter, it's your own fault. It's extraordinarily unfair and it's unhelpful if we really care about closing the gender gap. The problem, the solution, is just bigger than any one of us. And that brings me to my third and final lie, which is that imposter syndrome is inevitable. So if we don't fix ourselves, what do? We go to the source. The notion of bicycle face was debunked by Dr. Sarah Hackett Stevenson. She was the first ever woman admitted to the American Medical Association. She didn't tell women to fix their bicycle face. And she certainly didn't tell them to stop pedaling. She challenged the entire premise. When as many as 82% of women report feeling imposter syndrome, it's hard to believe that this is just about individuals. Imposter syndrome is the result of structural inequality, not individual inadequacy. Look, I've sat across from some powerful dudes, CEOs, presidents, senators, you name it. And that experience has truly been a gift. Not because they are smarter than I am, but because they're not. I told you about the hundreds of thousands of girls that I've taught to code. Well, any one of them could run circles around these dudes. But it took me 30 years to learn this lesson. And this is why I'm sharing it with you today, because right here, right now, I need you to know this. It's never been about whether we're qualified enough, smart enough, prepared enough. If you are here today, it is because you are. Instead, it's always been about the political, the financial, the culture barriers that are designed to keep us out of these rooms in the first place. It's leaders who look around and tell women the biggest problem facing you is not childcare or paid leave or misogyny. The biggest problem is you. Which is all to say that imposter syndrome, it's a distraction. It's a strategy. It's a way to keep our concentration on our own alleged inadequacies so we don't turn it towards the sexism, the racism, the classism, the homophobia, the transphobia that is baked into the system in the first place. Which means our job is to stay focused, to focus less on fixing ourselves and more on healing a broken world. Now, for many of you, I know this work is not new. Marginalized people, women of color, we've been leading the fight against systematic injustice for generations. And your generation has been fighting the status quo your whole lives. So here is the task ahead of you, class of 2023, is to know that you are more than good enough so that you can dedicate your precious, limited time on the things that aren't. My great hope is that you will want to take up this work, that you will want to build a better world than the one you inherited. And I am absolutely certain that you are up to the task because your Smith education has prepared you for this moment. This is a special place. For the past 4 years, you've been part of a community where no team captain, no club president, no valedictorian has ever been held back because of their gender. And I know it's bittersweet to leave that behind, but consider this. You've had a tiny glimpse of what the world could be, what it should be. Now bring that audacity, that agency, that authenticity to the world beyond Northampton. Because you are uniquely qualified to make that world a reality. Imposter syndrome is modern day bike face. My hope is that one day Smithies of the future will see them both as equally laughable. Just 2 more failed attempts to hold us back. Getting there, though, will be the work of a lifetime. But I believe that there's one thing you can do today on this first day of the new chapter of your life and every day moving forward. Just ride your bicycle. And what I mean by that is pursue what you want to pursue. As if imposter syndrome is just 2 made-up words on a page, because they are. Do your work. Make your argument. Lead your movement. Because there's nothing wrong with you. It's not your job to fix yourself, but it is your job to fix the system. And from everything I've heard about this class, you're going to do a damn good job doing it. Because you have what it takes to lead. And you have an entire community. Because if you fall, they are right here to pick you up. So start pedaling. Feel the sun on your face. Feel the wind in your hair. Feel the joy. Feel the freedom. Feel the love. Congratulations, class of 2023, on reaching this incredible milestone. You're ready. Go.
All right. It was a mental health matter, and then you see it quickly transition into gender and racial bias, but again, as she just said, I want you to remember a couple of things with this imposter syndrome. Know this: that you are unique. You are qualified. You are not alone. Ride your bicycle and take your seat at the table. I will see you at the top, family. Have a wonderful week, and I'm out. Thank you.